Welcome to the Innovation Ecosystem Podcast. We interview remarkable and thought-provoking guests about innovation, leadership, and change in the world of business. Whether you're an executive or an entrepreneur, our objective is to help you and your organisation create an entrepreneurial culture, become more innovative, and better able to respond to change. Each week, we'll deconstruct world-class performance from the arenas of business, academia, science, and sports. Each week, you can expect key insights, fresh perspectives, and proven tools you can use straight away to make you more successful professionally and personally. With your hosts, Mark Bidwell and Roddy Miller.
Hello, I'm Roddy Miller, your co-host on the Innovation Ecosystem Podcast. In our previous show, my colleague, Mark Bidwell, was in conversation with the thought leader, Dory Clark. Please do hop over to our website, www.innovationecosystem.net, to take a listen. Today we're with Orit Wolf, the international pianist and leadership innovation consultant. She brings together two really important aspects here of creativity, innovation, and working in large corporate organizations too. So a fascinating set of insights that we can really dig into. Good morning to you, Orit.
Good morning, Roddy. Good to hear from you.
Hi, I'm really glad that we're able to speak today. We've known each other for a little while, and I think what I know of your background puts you in a fascinating position to have a discussion around this innovation ecosystem topic. I think it'd be really interesting to dig into how you use your musical background in a corporate world. But before we do that, perhaps we ought to just understand a little bit better where you come from in a musical sense. When did you start playing the piano, and how did you get into that?
That's a lovely question. I started in a very young age, when I was 6 years old. And I have to tell you that I did not have parents who pushed me into music or piano lessons. It was on the contrary. I was really envying a good friend of mine that I used to go to school with every day in the first grade. And she got piano lessons, and I was so jealous of seeing her playing so well and getting those lessons that I just, one day I said to the piano teacher of hers, would I be able to bring my mother the next day in order to have myself starting piano lessons? So she set a time for me and my mother, and the next day I took my mother to a place she never knew. She never heard about the teacher. She never heard where she lives, and I remember taking my mother hand by hand to this neighborhood piano teacher, and I forced my mother to start giving me piano lessons. And I have to tell you something really interesting, because I think the raw or the seeds for this passion was already there. My parents did not buy me a piano right away. They said to me, if you are so eager to learn piano, then you should practice at your friend's house for a while. And every day between 4 and 4:30 in the afternoon, I had a slot of time to come and practice at my friend's place. And this was for months and months until my friend's mother called and phoned my mother and said, Ruth, I think you've got to buy your daughter a piano by now, as the piano is in our bedroom and it's quite disturbing. So that was a real crazy story. And sure enough, a few days later, I came home from school and a new piano was waiting for me. And it was a beautiful start, Roddy, because I think when you're pushed to something, and when your parents or your teachers have to nudge you and remind you to go and practice, then you really do not have this passion. And I would dare to say the dirty word obsession as well. What I'm looking for in musicians and leaders, we'll see it later on, is this dirty word obsession. You have to have passion and some kind of an obsession for something that you really love. So that was the start, and 2 years later I was very lucky to got accepted to do one of those, I call them Madame Suzatska teachers. The film, the British film Madame Suzatska with Shirley MacLaine, I'm sure you know.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, and it's about this piano teacher that rules her pupils' lives and really control them. So I always say what I had is 10 times more than Madame Suzatska film. Because it was really harsh education in a way. It's about 3 times a week to have lessons. And I remember my teacher would say to my father, bring her at 7:30, but I'm not sure where you're taking her back. So lessons were about 2.5 hours, 3 hours at a time. And she gave all her lives to her students, and we had to give all our attention and passion and life to the piano. So that was a start. And from very young age, you go into this new zone of competitions, of winning and losing, of selling yourself at the age of 9 or 10 to, big audiences, standing in front of audiences, selling yourself, even if we don't want to use this word, but it is about selling. It is about creating art, but also conveying and approaching and communicating your message to lots of people. Later I'll tell you how I got to innovation, but that was the start anyway.
That's a great story. I'm interested, do you think your parents were fully appreciative of the approach that they were taking, and that by making you go out and learn at someone else's house and have to get through the routine of practice, they were testing you to a certain extent, or was it just that was more convenient?
That's a great one. I think they didn't know what they're getting into, that's for sure. And no one knew, because when you go into this profession, it's not about profession, it's about a way of life. And the way you run your life is different. I remember my parents would let me skip some school as well, something that is unheard of nowadays. But I remember that days that I had to be ready for competitions or concerts, they would ask me if I want to stay home, and that was acceptable. So they flew with the wind, and they realized that at a very young age, I think it was 11 or 12, that I'm in the route of being a concert pianist, and there is a price to pay for that. It means that you have to practice between 4 to 6 hours a day, that you have to have different rests, that you have to practice, you have to do rehearsals with others, you have to do chamber music, you have to learn theory and so many other professions that connected to piano. It's not just about piano, it's about learning the context of which you are surrounded. It's going to festivals, it's going abroad. For the first time I took an airplane when I was 12, was to play in Germany and Belgium. And it was the first time on the airplane without my parents, alone. To play with orchestras. So it's a new way of life, but they never pushed it. They never asked me to practice. On the contrary, they said, enough practicing, come have something to eat. So,
but you had that inner drive to practice. I mean, I know as a parent of children who play or practice the piano, or at least learn the piano, that getting them to go and practice is a pretty much a full-time occupation. But it sounds to me like you had. That wasn't an issue for your parents. The practicing, you were devoted to the piano. That passion was there already, and you wanted to build on it constantly.
Yes. I think you said the right word, the inner drive, this passion. I had it inside me. And this is actually the first characteristic, or the first trait that I'm looking for when I meet with different leaders or different people who are involved with innovation. But I have to tell you the story, how I came about to deal with those two professions, to have two sides in me, that one is in the music and art and the other is in innovation and leadership and managers. So the thing was very funny. I went on stage one day on a live recording to the radio, and it was both a live recording and a live concert in Jerusalem. And the worst thing that can happen to a concert pianist happened to me that day. And you can imagine what it was, because after 12 minutes of playing, by heart, of course, I had a blackout. And that was a very crucial and meaningful moment in my whole life, I can say, because, I was always told the show must go on. You have to keep going, but nobody told me how to keep going. Nobody told me how to turn a mistake into an opportunity. Nobody told me how not to play just from memory of notes. Nobody taught me how to improvise. So I remember stopping the music, and it was a live recording, and it was such a shameful occasion. I felt embarrassed, I felt shame, I felt so sad, I didn't know where to put myself. And eventually I kept going, but it was not the same, and it was a terrible concert. But I'm telling you,
but you kept going, playing
exactly
the music as you expected it to be, as you hoped it would be, or you had the confidence to improvise at that stage.
No, I hadn't had the courage to improvise. I was absolutely reluctant of those tools, which I had to have. But it was a crucial moment, because when I finished this concert, which was horrible, I realized that if I want to be on stage, I've got to have the right tools of composition, of improvisation, of self-courage, of self-esteem, of being able to go out of any mistakes and turn it into something beautiful on stage. So I started to learn composition and improvisation, and it was a whole new start for me. And it gave me, like, an insurance policy. That's what I always feel. I bought an insurance policy that no matter what, I can go on and do a lovely performance, even if I don't have my notes, or even if I forgot the music, or even if it's too hot or people are making lots of noises. And that was a very important moment, because I think that this moment I realized that this is what's connecting so much to leadership, because you have lots of people who give lectures, but look at them. Are they using their notes? Would they do it without a computer, without a PowerPoint presentation? Can they convey their message without their tools? Can they just be there alone on stage without any instrument and still give you an impact, a powerful presentation? That's a very, interesting question. And I have to tell you that since then, the search for innovation, the search for what happens in the brain of those who improvise, it was very fascinating for me, and I dedicated my life to research these issues. What happens to people who, in stressful moments, improvise? How do they make their decision? It's all about decision making. How you make a decision to take one route or another. How you turn one motive into something else. So that's a very fascinating subject in music, but it's actually not about music, because soon enough I found myself lecturing about it, and people from businesses say to me, listen, could you come to my organization and talk about these issues? And I would say, remember, I was about 21 years old, and I would say, listen, I don't see the correlation. I've never learned business. I've never learned marketing. I was not trained in those professions. How can I give you any benefit or added value? And I remember it was from Teva, the pharmaceutical company. They said, I know you would, and please come and speak about those decision-making and about those innovative decisions that you're making on stage. Please talk to my colleagues and my team about your life. And that was another turning moment, because I learned from that moment that there is something in music making that can give so much insights to other professions.
But that story of you as still a young performer on the stage and blacking out as to how the music continued. I mean, that's a very in the moment crisis, isn't it? And hopefully, in the vast majority of corporate decision making, we don't have 1,000 eyes on us expecting us to play the next note. Now, you had no time to stop and consider what your alternatives were. You just had to, it has to flow at that stage. So innovating and improvising in the moment is a huge skill. And I wonder whether it, being so under the microscope in that kind of situation allows you a greater calmness or a greater ability to deal with similar kinds of issues when you do have a bit more space, a bit more time to reflect in a corporate situation.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. When you're on stage, you have to make very, very fast decisions, and improvisation is the tool. But if you reflect on this later on and you realize what was the causes for this I would call disruption, because in business we're speaking about the word disruption. It's very high, I would say, hot word nowadays. What are the disruptions that you were facing, and how you solved them, how you approached them? Did you ignore them, or did you use them for your advantage? So if you reflect on this later on, and we call it also reverse engineering. I'll tell you that when I was studying at the Royal Academy of Music. I don't know if many people know, but it's in London, in Marylebone Road, and down in the basement there is a pub, there is a bar, and there is a custom, like a very interesting custom, that every good concert, your teacher is supposed to take you down to the bar and invite you for a beer. And then you talk about the reverse engineering of your performance. And I think this is a very correlated process for businesses. So even if you have a wonderful successful presentation or process that you've done with your team or project, instead of just rejoicing and celebrating, we actually, beyond the celebration, we do a process of reverse engineering, meaning we're going backwards in time and in processes to understand what was the causes that made it so successful, or vice versa, what was the cause that made it so not good, so failing. And we learn from this process, and then actually we record ourselves as well, and we film ourselves, and we look at ourselves in reflection. So it's very visual, it's very, you can actually see it and catch it in your eyes. But I think that businesses do not often do reverse engineering enough as a daily process.
No, I think that's a really powerful point. I remember someone talking about this to me a while ago, and again, it's interesting that the bar comes into it. But he said if people spent as much time thinking about how they do their work and how they indeed how they lead their lives as they do in the bar analyzing a game of football after it's happened, then we would all improve dramatically. So there's far more time spent analyzing how your team has performed on the pitch at the weekend than anyone ever does about how their project's gone or how other elements of their lives go. And I think that's a really, really strong sort of.
Thank you. Absolutely. I think I love what you said about football, because I think in football as well, in sports, people do this reverse engineering. They sit with their coach and they analyze success and failure. And so do we as musicians. And I also like to say that the reason we do it is not because we are also so exposed, but also because music, it's about playing and not gaming. And, we say we play the piano, we don't game the piano. Mm-hmm. And I think in this very verb, the verb play, you have all the essence of what we are making. And I think we can take it into business, because play means let's explore. That's the word. Let's explore. Let's try. Let's rejoice with it. Let's contemplate with that. It's not about just winning or losing. It's not just about one endless result. We're looking for different tastes and different trials. And I remember that the first lesson I've had in the Royal Academy was absolutely gorgeous, because I was playing the Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven, and the teacher said to me, "Could you play it completely different?" And I would say, "What do you mean completely different?" He said, "Take off your chair and stand up and play it without a chair, and play it fast and loud. And then can you make it in a jazz style? And can you make it in a more impressionistic style?" So the ability to take a piece of music, or let it be a piece of job or a project that we all know, and actually drive it in different ways, deliver it in different tastes, it's so fascinating for the imagination, because it doesn't lead you to understanding that there is only one way to do a job. We don't do the job. We actually don't want people to do just their job. We want people to leave their stamp behind, to leave a personal mark behind. We're looking for the differences, because otherwise, if I would send you to YouTube to hear any beautiful piece that you love, the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven, the Moonlight Sonata, Mozart concertos, you'd find over hundreds of different performances. How do you know what's best? Now, there is not a best one. It's about differences. It's about tastes. And I think in businesses, we ought to really train people to look for newness, to look for creativity, to look for not just winning or losing or competing, but rather to bring your own personal mark into the music of the business that you play.
I think that's really fascinating. It brings up 2 points, I suppose. One, which is that in able to improvise, you have to have real depth of knowledge and skill to be able to do it well, presumably. You've got to completely have mastered the foundations of whatever instrument you're playing, if we're talking in a musical context, and be able to draw on those and pull them in quickly. So you have that on one side, is that mastery that it is required. And in order to get mastery, we know there's masses of practice to input it. But on the other side, I'm very conscious of, it was Drucker's quote, that organizations shouldn't need geniuses to run them. They need average people to run them. So you clearly have an exceptional skill with the piano, and that enables you to do this. We can't expect everyone to have that level of skill. So is it possible to be innovative and improvise if you've only got a sort of an average skill set and knowledge of your work?
Well, I love what you said, and I'd love to relate to the 2 points you mentioned. Yes, first of all, you do need to have full capacity and mastery of your instrument. Otherwise, if you don't have the norms that you're good at, if you're not sitting in a box, I would say, then you cannot get out of the box. So you need a box in the very first place. And I like people to learn the box, but I also like them to forget the box. So this is number one that we're trying to train, and this is the difference between leaders and managers, and between players and real artists. Real artists and real leaders are the ones who know the boxes, but they can actually forget about them while presenting and leading the work. But you asked me about the average. I think, in every creature, there is creativity. And look how beautifully the word is creativity, creature, creating. It's the same verb. It's the same essence of the word, meaning in every creature, we have the essence of creativity. So it's about, I would say, educing. Educing is a lovely verb. It means taking out what's already existing in the person, not bringing anything new, but actually knowing how to take what's already there and bring it out, educing the talent of oneself. And, you're very right that nowadays, the power is not about those people who learned the job. I mean, you don't see, for example, for top management jobs or top VP of marketing, I don't see anymore people who learn necessarily marketing all their lives. So this is a very interesting point, that we're actually looking nowadays for people who have a much versatile and interdisciplinary vast knowledge. And this is what we're looking for in an artist, somebody who can do lots of other things, somebody who can give concert lectures, who can play different instruments, who can compose, who can conduct, not just a one-path person. So this is what we're looking for. And I would say to you that if number one was for us the innovation, but I would say the number two for me when I'm looking for artists and big leaders is a sentence that I take with me all my life, which is feel number one, even if you're not. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that plays to the whole concept of having personal confidence, doesn't it? Which you've got to be sure of yourself in order to move forward in a slightly different direction. And if you're, and that plays to that creativity. I love that connection between creature and creativity, and sort of thought of that before. And I think it plays to a passion of mine, which is about trying to get people to be themselves more, to be more human, not only in how they work within an organizational structure, but also how they allow other people to relate to them. And I think somewhere at the seed of that is a core of creativity.
Right. Yeah.
And I wonder from your perspective, both as a performer, but also perhaps within large organizations, of if there's things that you do to try and build that connection between yourself as a performer and the audience, and trying to get people to build relationships within organizations so that they're more creative.
Yes, I'd love to relate to this. I think that the idea of working only with top managers or the top hierarchy of the organization is no longer appealing. for me when I arrive to organization. For me, what's very important is to see how those leaders are actually approaching every human being in the company. It doesn't mean that they have to know every human being in the company, but it means that they have to have the access and the knowledge and the ability to learn from them better than they learn from themselves. And I think this is about an audience. I have to make sure, even though I do not look at my audience while I'm playing, that I can catch every bit of attention from everyone, that I can really relate to everyone in the audience, even if it's 2,000 people in the audience. So my goal when I go on stage is actually to bring 2,000 people in a feeling that they are in the salon of my own home, as if they were sitting in my own salon. And this is a great challenge, because how are you making a huge capacity of audience that you don't even look at them while you play the piano, feeling at home, at your very own home? So it's about making this intimacy and the legitimacy to feel in such a way that I think this is the challenge of a great leader, to make everyone of the organization has the legitimacy to be part of the decision, to be part of the process. It's true, we cannot be innocent. If you're in the last hierarchy, you can't affect all the major decision, of course. But if you can have the legitimacy to have your sound speak out, and if you have the legitimacy for an open door to your leader, then we're creating a real beautiful circle of feedback. So another question that I also used to start a workshop with when I come, to a room of, the big managers, I know how to do the job. What can she teach me now? I always say I have nothing to teach leaders. It's just about awareness and exposure. And I always like to have them write their CV of failures. That puts you in different place whatsoever. If you take a piece of paper and instead of saying, what's your success, but actually you write down your CV of failures, or even we don't have to take it so far away. We can actually ask people to write the failure of the month or the failure of the week that they just had. That's quite provocative. That's quite provocative, task, because people do not like to speak about failures, right?
And how does that go? And that opens up the conversation, no doubt. I mean, I think dealing with failure and the attitude to failure is absolutely critical to creating an environment of innovation and success.
Exactly.
So what's the sense that you get when you pose that question from?
That's I'm laughing because I always remind myself that the faces of people when I ask this task, because people are shocked. But I always start with my own stories of failures, and I do not put them in this situation of just exposure without me giving a personal examples. I start with my own personal experience of going on stage and failing, or forgetting what I wanted to say, or forgetting lots of things. And when you open up this box, which is a very black box, you discover that people are very human and fragile. Beautiful essence is coming out because we leave our egos and our masks away. And isn't it what we want to reach eventually from every process and organizational processes within the organization? It's amazing. When you're able to share your weaknesses, then you open a beautiful karma of your own team to share their own failures or their own challenges. Let's call it challenges. I love it.
And do people get that straight away, or not straight away, but at least at the end of that exercise?
Absolutely. I don't let them go away until they share their own.
There's no failure at that stage. I don't know. Have you had feedback from people on how they have then used that back in the workplace? So do you get to see the impact of people being more human around that, sharing failure, and you never want to champion it, but you want to say that it is an inevitable part of progress, of moving forward.
Exactly.
And do you get feedback from people saying that it has created a difference?
Very much so, very much. I get lots of letters and emails, and also I see those people again and again, and they have some homework, and they tell me how it was to start a meeting, while starting the meeting about telling the story, the failure story of the month. And first of all, it creates lots of humor in the room, which is about, it's causing embarrassment, but the embarrassment brings humor, and it's a new approach to our weaknesses. And it's putting them straightforward on the table in a very strong light and giving them a stage. So people love it. I mean, they're afraid of it. I wouldn't say they were not afraid of it in the beginning, but once they put it on, it's a beautiful, I would say, product to use. Also, what I like to compliment them is to say, okay, after this exercise, you have to have a new exercise of asking people their dreams. So another question that you can really train artists and leaders is actually to ask them, no matter how financial issues are involved. Let's imagine that you have all the money in the world that you can invest in your idea. What would be that fantasy that you'd love to pursue within your job? Or that you'd love, what is the dream or the fantasy that you'd love to engage your job with? And you'd be surprised, Roddy, that so many people do not have dreams, do not have fantasies. It's actually quite, startling and shocking for me that even if you let people dream, they forget their dreams because they are so occupied in the daily tasks, in the daily what I must do and what I ought to do. And those verbs, must and ought and need, they're very scary verbs because they put you in that box again of things that we all have to do. Now, we all have to do things that we don't like, but how much percentage do you actually put in it? Or how much percentage do you leave for the fantasy, for the dream, for the contemplation, for the experience, for the exploration, for the time, for the free time that you need in the space? And this is leading me, Roddy, for the really big last thing that I'd love to talk about. In music we say music is not the sounds, it's not the notes. It's the time you take between the notes. And this is a very strong message for leadership because it's not about what you do. It's about the space between what you do, the space between what you say, the space between your mind and your words and your thoughts, and the space you take for yourself to reevaluate your own processes and doing. I hope you can.
I think that's a fantastic point, and it resonates with me hugely. That and it goes back to that word that you used earlier, which is the having the opportunity to reflect and think about the wider horizon rather than just perhaps the narrow issue at hand. So I think that's a fantastic and powerful point to end on, and a very uplifting one too. Orit, it's been superb talking to you. There's always so many interesting ideas coming out, and I love that interplay of the piano, the music, the improvisation, and how it transfers to a large extent seamlessly into other parts of modern life too. Everything is connected from that point of view. So thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for me, and I could go on and on. It's such a beautiful time to speak with you and engage with those thoughts. So many, many thanks.
Thanks a lot.
I always really enjoy my conversations with Orit. She has a warmth and humanity that we often miss or perhaps lose when immersed in the daily firefighting of commerce. But we should keep close by us if we're really going to prosper and enjoy life. What Orit brings, though, is that special mixture of openness and warmth, with a steely determination and passion. She knew from the earliest age that she needed to play the piano, and had the self-discipline to practice, like few parents will have experienced. What is the lesson we can draw from this? Not everyone can have that supreme inner passion driving them to follow a particular path. But as leaders, we need to create the space for people to be passionate about their work. Often this may mean allowing people to do things that are not directly related to the job at hand. The Google Friday approach, where 20% of an employee's time was free for them to try out new stuff, although admittedly Google itself doesn't champion this as much today as they used to. One of the other main discussions we had in the conversation was around the need to really gain mastery of your tasks, whether that is playing an instrument or getting results in your work, in order to improvise and innovate. We know that a skilled joiner is going to be much better able to create something useful out of 3 planks and a rope than your average Joe could. And the same applies for work. So mastery is really important. And Orit was very clear on the fact that having learnt the rules, it is important to then learn how to live and work without them, to not feel constrained by them. And I suppose this is where leaders can learn. We can and must create those environments where skilled people can feel safe to leave the rules, or the box, as Orit puts it, behind them. Lots there to think on. In our next show, Mark was speaking with Chris Goppelsröder, the Swiss president and CEO of the $8 billion turnover Dutch foods company DSM Nutritional Products, a company that has, in Goppelsröder's words, innovation as part of its DNA. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please do hop over to our website, www.innovationecosystem.net, where you can find a link to Orit's website and learn more about what she does, as well as download the transcript for this podcast and get the show notes and lots of other goodies. If you enjoy these shows, we would really appreciate if you can take a couple of moments to rate and review them on iTunes. These shows take a good bit of time and energy, and we love to get your feedback that way. I look forward to being with you again shortly.